Wilds of Eldraine has tens of adventures, which make for almost a fifth of all cards from the set. Adventures are again a huge theme here, just like in the last set. And we start with a weird cycle that has more to do with Throne of Eldraine than Wilds of Eldraine, of the 5 virtues. The 5 virtues of the human realms, reinterpreted from the elves that came before those humans. And at first we have the virtue of loyalty, where at first you will see the rings in the middle, which are actually new, I think. Every one of these virtues start with an adventure, of course, as you are in this video, which is in this case Ardenvale Fealty, which is one of the realms. And then they become an enchantment, so the virtue sort of stays. And here you can see how people have to prove their loyalty, which is that they need to look past all the riches in this room, which you see in both of the versions of the card, to get to the rings, which sort of signify a bond between multiple people. So in the adventure you create a knight, which is when you become a knight for Ardenvale, and then the virtue itself will say that at the beginning of your end step you grow the creature in strength, and then or grow all your creatures in strength, because this is not about one person, but this is about all of your people. And then you also untap them because they need to be vigilant, just like the Knights of Ardenvale. Then we have the virtue of knowledge, where we can see that you need to ascend a staircase, need to look through a library, need to know probably everything. And in this story, I like that you need to walk on books as well, which is, I think, very cute. And Fentress will give you visions at first. That is how you become knowledgeable. So you copy an activated or triggered ability, and you may, well, choose new targets, which I think signals that you need to copy some magic spell from the castle itself. Then we get the Virtue of Knowledge, which again, note by the way that this is always higher costed than the adventure. Way higher in some cases, but this is just 5. If a permanent triggers an ETB, you do it a second time. So this effect has been used a bunch of times, and I think Azorius is really moving into that space of doubling triggers of ETBs, which is very strong. And I think it says that it also helps you double the triggers of the new knights that come in. So at first you double something or you repeat something from the castle, and then the castle helps you repeat something from yourself. It's basically what I'm getting from this. We have the Virtue of Persistence, which is about, I think, getting to this tower, getting through the mud, the swamps. So you will be scorned by the swamps, which will try to keep you there, which will lessen your strength and then gain life for the one that casts the spell. Probably used to be a Yara. Interesting that we didn't really see what happened to Locthwain otherwise. But at the beginning of your upkeep, when you have the Virtue of Persistence, you can return a creature card from a graveyard under the battlefield under your control. So no matter how many people you lose in those swamps, you can get them back eventually. Then we have the Virtue of Courage, which is of course about walking over a wooden bridge, which is over a pool of lava, which is ill-advised. So this will deal some damage to any target, so it's sort of a shock, but 1 mana extra, which is okay, because then for 5 mana you can cast the enchantment, the Virtue of Courage, which says that whenever you deal non-combat damage to an opponent, you may exile that many cards from the top of your library and play those cards this turn. So this seems to become a very fun card, where every time that you hit your opponent with non-combat damage, you get to get more of those non-combat damage spells probably that you wanted to cast. Also note that these are not legendary, so you could have multiple ones if you have enough mana, that is, of course. But I feel a sort of fun red-green deck where you get a lot of direct damage. And maybe we should explain the deck before you say why not red-blue. but later. We have the green one, which is Virtue of Strength. The first adventure is only 1 mana, which says to return a creature or land from your graveyard to your hand. Not too powerful, but still. And then for 7 mana, so basically way more expensive. But we are guessing that we can get some lands back from your milling, I guess. Which has, if you tap a basic land for mana, it produces 3 times as much mana instead, which is green's virtue, basically, because green has a bunch of effects like this as well. Alright, on to the new kind of adventures, which is not about knights. We have, for example, Lagoon Breach, which is about a whale breaching the water. Or maybe about the griffin who is breaching the privacy of this whale. Which says, the owner of target attacking creature you don't control puts it on the top or bottom of their library. Which I think is a very strong effect for just 2, but they do need to attack with it, of course, so it is just offensive. But I feel like that is very strong, because usually this effect costs you 4 or 5 mana. And then also with Flash, you can cast the 6/6 Will, which does enter tapped when you flash it in, so it isn't that defensive, but it does get to attack after that. So it is kind of a more aggressive card. So I think otherwise it would have been way too powerful as well. We have the Gumdor Poisoner, which shows a fun effect of these alternate art cards, where the alternate art shows us someone that has a tentacle arm, and this is just how the story is told. But the real witch doesn't really have a tentacle arm, she just has a glove on her hand, but she does hold the same lamp. So she tempts with treats, which makes you a food token for just 1 mana, and then for 3 mana you still get a 3/2, which when it enters, target creature gets -X or X amount of life you gain this turn. So plays with food. If you pay 2 mana and then this, which is 5 mana, this also is a -3 effect. You pay 2 mana, right? Yeah, I think so. Then we have the Bramble Familiar, which shows the same effect, where the familiar has been blown out of proportion. It isn't really that big, or at least in this art it isn't. So it has a fetch quest for 7 mana, so this time the sorcery or the adventure is way more expensive, which helps you mill 7 cards, then put a creature, enchantment or land card from among the milled cards onto the battlefield. And the fun thing is, here you can discard a card, which... no, that doesn't work, because you only get to return the milled cards. But it does get them to your battlefield. So if you have like a 10 mana creature, which aren't really in the set, I think, then you can return that as well. But 7 mana is still a lot of mana, so you must want to mill cards. But you can return the Bramble Familiar to its owner's hand for that 2 mana. Bit weird, a 2 mana elf. Then we have Biluna, who has these 2 versions, and Biluna is all about getting the spoils of adventure. So here we see one of the adventures, which is about the gingerbread house, and one of the carriage, which she has made smaller, or she's also a giant, so it might be that. And then we see the mirror behind her. Not really sure what the scale is here, how big the mirror is, or if she is just a giant. But the mirror must be pretty big, at least, to be as big as a giant. Which she has stolen. This is the magic mirror from Fentress. So yeah, she is just about the permanent spells that come after an adventure, which is why they cost a bit less. Again, for her adventure, you mill 7 cards. The other one did that as well, which I just now noticed. And then you put all the cards that have an adventure from among the milled cards into your hand, and then they will be cheaper to cast, or at least the permanent spells from them. Biluna has a gatekeeper as well, which doesn't really have a name. But this does make us know that this noble is really important for the giants, at least. Well, and they stop basically anyone that comes to try to climb the beanstalk. We have a nightmare, which is from Ashiok, probably. which says mill 4 cards. Maybe that is about making the difference between like the real adventures and the nightmares, something like that. But they also get power and toughness equal to the number of creature cards in all graveyards. So this can be a really big creature. I think this will be really strong. It feels like some of the cards that are in Modern, but a little bit weaker. We have the Decadent Dragon. So a lot of these are multicolored, and I think they are all about the dangers of the wilds. And this dragon is one of those dangers. You shouldn't touch their gold or treasure. This dragon has an expensive taste. It says exile the top 2 cards of target opponent's library face down, so you steal something from them, which many opponents don't like. You may play them, well, anytime. Or, well, not anytime. You may play them just like you could play them. So sorcery only on sorcery speed. But then, after you've stolen 2 cards from your opponent, you get a 4 mana 4/4 dragon, which is already good, but they also get flying and trample. And when they attack, you create a treasure. So that is real power creep coming from something that used to be just an elemental for 5 mana. 5 mana 4/4 with flying used to be normal. We have the devouring sugar maw, which has white and black. White for having dinner and black for being a devouring monster. The 2 mana one should be cute, but this is about creating a 1/1 that will be eaten as well, and then a food token. Or maybe the human will have some of this candy for dinner, something like that. Also note these gummy worms, which have been featuring in some other art as well. Maybe you can, well, search for it. It is about killing one of them. The 4 mana creature is a 6/6, so that tells us something that maybe there needs to be a downside. But it also has menace and trample, so no downside yet. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, you may sacrifice an artifact, enchantment or token. If you don't, you have to tap it. So you can only use this if it gets to eat, is the flavor here. The adventure is needed sort of to get the devouring sugar maw to eat the human that ate the food. So it's sort of an endless cycle, which is a beautiful tale. We have the elusive otter, which is very cute. Definitely here, I'd say. The gross bounty makes creatures grow. So it gives +1 counters to any number of target creatures you control for the amount of mana that you can make with the growth and the gross bounty. Also note this beautiful adventure, which has like these leafy patterns on it, which I really like. So you distribute the counters from the strength of the growth, and then later the 1 mana 1/1 otter can come in as well, and creatures with power less than the otter can't block it. So if this grows too large, that is a real menace, and this seems to be staying around that growth, so it might be growing as we can see here from its tail. And if this is really big, then that's really dangerous. We have the Heartflame Duelist, which is red-white, still a knight, which is interesting because most of these cards are from the wild. But this seems like an Embereth, Ardenvale mashup, where the Heartflame Slash is a 3 mana damage spell for 3 mana to any target. So we had a 2 mana 2 damage, and now we have a 3 mana 3 damage as well. Seems to be that the cost to mana for damage here is 1 mana to 1 damage. And then for 2 mana you can cast the Duelist, which has instant and sorcery spells you control have lifelink. Note how all of these adventures and creatures work very well together up to this point. The fire of Embereth will never be doused. So in this case, if you have this one on the battlefield and you have another Heartflame Slash, you get a 3 mana 3 damage heal 3 damage as well for yourself. Then we have Kellen, which is one of the legendaries that is also an adventure, who has the Birthright Boon, which are these things that he got from his father. Search your library for an aura or equipment card, which is in his case these two hilts that can become Sword of Swords. Reveal it, put it into your hand and shuffle. For 2 mana, not too bad for something like that. But you do need a dedicated equipment or aura deck. And then for 3 mana you get a 2/2 with double strike, which is pretty good because it is already a 4/2, but also like 2 mana of that is first strike. And then other creatures you control get +1/+0 for each aura and equipment attached to Kellen. So a little bit weird because you want to strengthen Kellen, but then Kellen also strengthens all of your other creatures a little bit. I feel like Kellen is very good in an equipment deck with evasive creature tokens next to him, which must be fairies, I think. So a little bit weird deck and will be interesting to build, and he seems strong anyway. Because he is so narrow, I guess. Then we have the Mousewood Dread Knight, which is a knight we haven't really seen, I think. But interesting, let's look at him. So the Dread Whispers is what called this knight to his job, I guess. Draw a card, lose a life. This is also what we saw on the knight, the zombie knight from before, but this is not a zombie yet. He is being overgrown, not really sure what this means, but maybe it's being whispered out by the woods, something like that. And then the knight itself, for 2 mana you have a 3/2 with trample, which is pretty good. And when it dies you may cast it from your graveyard as an adventure until the end of your next turn. Which I think does mean that you get to play the knight again. Doesn't it? I think so, because when you cast Adventure, you get to exile the Mousewood Dread Knight again. So it keeps coming back as long as you can use the Dread Whispers. Maybe sort of because the moss helps him return every time. Maybe that is the flavor. This does look very metal if that's the case. Maybe he is all the way in moss. Then we have the Scalding Viper, which is about the theme of the water and fire elementals, which are from the mage Johan, who doesn't really know how to use elemental magic yet. But we have the Steam Clean, which is about the fact that he tried to clean his room with water elementals. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, so cleaning your room, basically. And then I think the fire elemental that he used to get rid of the water elemental, which then became a problem itself, is the elemental snake that you see here. For 2 mana, whenever an opponent casts a spell with mana value 3 or less, the Viper deals 1 damage to that player, and that does add up. Because it is any spell, not just sorceries or instants. We have the Questing Druid, a human druid, but again, we do sort of see that the humans that we see are attuned to nature up to this point. So we have the one that was attuned with fire magic, we have now the Questing Druid. And one fun part about the Questing Druid is that he has a staff in the form of a questing beast with the 3 heads. The first one is Seek the Beast, probably seeking the questing beast. Exile the top 2 cards of your library until your next end step. You may play those cards, so an Impulse Draw from red for the adventure of seeking the beast, and then you get the druid himself whenever you cast a spell that's white, blue, black or red, so anything but green. Put a +1 counter on the questing druid. Sort of wanting you to pair with another color, very much, well, to grow the questing druid to become stronger from his adventures is what I'm guessing. Then we have the Pollen shield hair, which is very cute, mostly in this one again, with the large ears that is protecting his small bunnies. So he or she, I don't know, is raising his little hairs, and this 1 mana adventure says target creature you control gains vigilance and +X until end of turn. Vigilance coming from white, interestingly, where X is the number of creatures you control, so wanting you to go wide. Then the 2 mana card also strengthens your tokens as a lord. So wants you to be a green-white token deck, which green-white is pretty good at. Also has some flavor. She can drive off any threat from owl to hunter to Phyrexian monster, which is why they are still alive. Going on to the ones that have just 1 art, which are not rares and mythics usually. We have the cheeky House Mouse for 1 mana. A 1 mana 2/1, which is already pretty good. So this one is all about the small creatures deck. Pretty good, I say, mostly in draft, maybe in standard, we don't know. Like a small standard adventure deck, something like that. We have the Squeak By as well, which says target creature you control gets +1/+1, and it can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater this turn. Sort of circumventing the fact that your opponents will make big blockers for all of your creatures. So it does seem pretty good in a little mouse deck, let's call it that. We have the Aquatic Alchemist, sort of going into the elemental theme of Eldraine. That is pretty new, but maybe this one has been made by Johan as well. This is a 2-mana elemental and also has an adventure which is bubble up, so this just bubbled up from one of the pots, I guess. Put target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard on top of your library. So while this was a creature that was bubbling up, of course bubbling up can also mean that the spells it is making are bubbling up. And then the alchemists themselves is a 2-mana 1/3 that gets +2/+0, so becomes a 3/3 already whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell each turn. So 2-mana 3/3, that's really good. 2-mana 1/3, still pretty good for blocking in draft. We have another giant who is playing with kites, which is pretty cool, and electricity, a little bit of a dangerous combination maybe. They do have electricity in a bottle, which is pretty cool. She can read the storms for 7 mana, drawing 4 cards and then discarding 2 of them. And then for 4 mana you have a 3/3, so not good yet, but whenever you cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater, you tap a target creature an opponent controls and put a stun counter on it, sort of freezing it, so basically 5 or greater. So that is pretty hard to do though. Well, this seems situational, but I guess that is what it should be. Also interesting how they can read the storms. Not really sure. Well, haven't really seen giants do that before on Eldraine. But then again, we don't know a lot of them either. We have Obira's attendants. Obira is the sleeping fae who is dueling everyone. She has attendants, sort of maybe helping her stay alive or something. Let's see. So we have the Desperate Parry, which is apparently from the attendants, I guess. Maybe they are trying to defend her. Or they are trying to defend themselves against Obira, because Obira will challenge anyone. And the parry will weaken a creature. And then for 5 mana you get the 3/4 Fairy Wizard. It's 3 wizards though. Okay, but okay. Obira's devoted servants shrieked as their sleeping mistress slashed at them. Yes, unseeing. So yeah, she is really attacking everyone, even her own attendants, which is a cool little lore part. We have the Picklock Prankster, sort of freeing a friend here. Free the Fae. Well, didn't I say so? Mill 4 cards. Interesting, that was the nightmare thing to do. Then put an instant sorcery or fairy card from among the milled cards into your hand. And for 2 mana you get a 1/3 with flying and vigilance. If your opponents don't have any blockers in the air, you can keep attacking for free because you don't have to block this and it will still be a blocker. You can't cage Mischief. Mischief. Is this a mischievous creature? What is this? Is this a Brushwag? Well, we do see the bees again. Oh, the bees. Oh, I really want to know more about them. Well, we have the Fentress Transmuter, which is not really a knight, just a mysterious person in the woods, it seems like. But these accessories are really cool. We have the Croaking Curse, turning something into a frog, I assume. Yes, enchanted creature is a 1/1. My orders were to capture you alive, they didn't specify in which form. So frog was a good form. Fell Horseman, a zombie knight, has the deathly right to arrive on. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, sort of saying that we should target our own knights. And then when it dies, put it on the bottom of its owner's library. So, we can't really return the Fell Horseman from the graveyard. But it will not really return anytime soon, so that's a little bit weird. But maybe we want something that makes us go infinite. with our deck because we mill so much, something like that. Maybe it just feels right. A 4 mana 3/3 otherwise not really too impressive. Bellowing Bruiser. Oh, that's really cool. This looks like a sort of Caledonian fist, but it does also look like a Fentress fist, which is a bit weird, but we see the lock here. We also know that the ogres have been wanting to learn about locks and doors because they don't really get the concept, because you always can get through doors, it seems. That is the largest motivation for many of these ogres. So in some way they do belong to Fentress because they want to learn so much. But this one says P the path. For 3 mana you can stop 2 creatures from blocking, and then for 5 mana you get the ogre himself, a 4/4 with haste. You can't give them the run around, so running around this doesn't really help. You should just run in a straight line if you want to survive. We have a Grabby one as well, grabbing a dwarf here. That's mine, and mine of course being the mine from the dwarf, I guess. Creating a treasure token, and then for 4 mana you get a 4/3 with reach, which I like, and then for 3 mana you sacrifice an artifact or land to draw a card. So very good in draft as well. Otherwise a fun. Hearth Elemental is a literal hearth, saying Stoke Genius. For 2 mana you discard your whole hand, then draw just 2 cards. So very impulsive as well. And for 6 mana you get a 4/5. Okay. This spell costs X less to cast, I like that, where X is the number of cards in your graveyard that are instant sorcery or that have an adventure. Okay, so you can very easily get this for 1 mana. That seems pretty fun. And also seems like you throw a lot of books into the hearth and then it will turn to life, which is a pretty fun flavor. We have the mine card Daredevil, a very quirky card from or art from Edgar Sanchez. Riding the rails. Don't really see rails here, but apparently they have them. Target creature becomes stronger, mostly in power, and then for 3 mana, 4/2 that says minds that once rang with the strikes of pickaxes now echo with shouts of reckless glee. It seems like the dwarves have stopped working and they turned into racing monsters. We have the red Catcher Trainee, who has a pest problem, which they can, they come for. Creating 2 reds, not really helping against the pest problem it seems. And then the red Catcher Trainee is really happy with the reds as well, saying where do they keep coming from? Maybe they don't like them, but they smile about them. As long as it's your turn, red Catcher Trainee has first strike. Maybe they keep letting them free or they are getting out, like this one. We have the two-headed hunter, a two-headed giant, saying twice the rage. Of course, there's 2 giants who are both raging. Target creature gains double strike until end of turn. Which says, of course, well, we have 2 creatures who can both attack. And then for 5 mana you get a menace 5/4. I pwned you club. Why does it get to attack twice then? The pointing is an attack as well. We have planting beans. For 2 mana you may play an additional land this turn. And then for 5 mana you get a 5/4 with reach. A big worm, which we have seen, maybe fighting a giant or something like that. When Biluna's pets escape Stormcelt, villages fall and new Everstalks rise. Oh, that's so interesting. So this worm sort of escapes and then makes new stalks. Maybe it's mating. Sorry. We have the Ferocious Were Fox, which we have seen before in the other alternate art video about the Curse of the Were Fox. A 4 mana 4/3 with trample, and their adventure is guard change, changing them into a monster by creating a monster roll attached to a creature, which means +1/+1 and trample on an enchantment. The 4 mana 4/3 has trample and says each night the elves of Redtooth keep transform into feral monstrous beasts. So all of them do, and we haven't seen this of the elves before, so that is a little bit weird maybe. But maybe there are more elves outside of Redtooth Keep. Redtooth Keep, of course, being the keep where all the noble elves reside and wait to take over the world again. This Scavenger is eating food, sort of candy, don't worry. The Bakery Raid creates a food token for 1 mana again. We had the black card as well that did this. And then for 1 mana you may sacrifice a food and this wolf becomes a 5/4. Pretty strong. 3 mana 5/4 can be a pretty big beater as well. So might be dangerous, this one. Is that repeatable? No, once. We have the Stormcelt Vanguards. Stormcelt is the city of the giants, as we just saw. They have a bear down adventure. Just a bear, but then another pun. Destroying an artifact or enchantment for 2 mana is not too bad. And then we have the creature itself, which is a 6 mana 6/7 that can be blocked by small creatures, like we see here, because they will sort of trample over them. He rides like thunder and strikes like lightning. So we see a second card, interestingly, that is about giants and lightning, sort of signifying and putting down the theme of giants and lightning. We have the Colossal Sword, who says burn together, maybe with his fellow merchants, or maybe he wants revenge on someone or something. Let's see, 1 mana, red mana, target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to any target, then sacrifice it. So yeah, it will burn itself as well. And then for 2 mana you get a 2/2 that enters with a +1 counter for each creature that died under your control this turn. Which works with the 1 mana sacrificing a creature, because then you will get a 3/3 for your Colossal Sword, at least. The Frolicking Familiar is working with the water and fire elementals again, so we see a lot of new themes for Eldraine, and none of them really get resolved, which is fun, because then we can get to return if we want to. For 1 mana you do 1 damage to any target, so we have 1 damage for 1 mana, we have 2 mana for 2 damage, and then we have 3 mana for 3 damage as well. The Frolicking Familiar is a 3 mana wizard. That is a 2/2 with flying, pretty good, but whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, so basically prowess, this otter gets +1/+1 until end of turn. The second otter as well, so there are a lot of themes that we are working on here, and none of them almost we have seen before, which is really interesting. Yeah, a fun choice, I would say. But does need some resolving, otherwise it's a bit too random, I would say. We have the Gingerbread Hunter, who is hunting on at least 6 gingerbreads, picking one out of his teeth as well, so maybe he eats them. He does eat the bodies, at least. They all look so shocked as well. A puny snack doesn't really work for a big snack, for a big giant. 3 mana, target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. Pretty okay. And then for 5 mana, you get a 5/5 that also enters with a food token. Because of course he brings his food. He shares. Ooh, cool. We have Immodane's Recruiter. And Immodane is the lady with the... What did she have? A big hammer? For 5 mana, you create 2 2/2s with Vigilance. So sort of like Virtue of Loyalty did in its adventure. And then for 3 mana, you get a 2/2. That enters the battlefield, and creatures you control get +1/+0 for seeing their recruiter and gaining haste and some motivation with that. Seems like a cool guy, but we haven't seen him in the story. The Picnic Ruiner is a small version of a Redcap Goblin. For 4 mana he steals goodies, distributing 3 +1 counters among creatures. It seems like food has been turning into +1 counter theme as well in this set. And then for 2 mana you get a 2/2 whenever it attacks while you control a creature with power 4 or greater. It gains double strike, so a 2 mana 2/2 double strike, that is pretty good already, like I said before. Only on the attack though, so that's a bit less. The Shrouded Shepherd says he can cleave shadows. For 2 mana, creatures your opponents control get -1/-1, so they get... maybe this is saying that you weaken the spirits of your opponents, because -1/-1 is just enough to kill a spirit, the traditional one at least. And then for 2 mana you get a 2/2 that enters and a creature gets +2/+2. Maybe because the shepherd is shielding someone. it seems. Maybe the shepherd's the white glow that we see around here, protecting against the shadows that are around here. That's pretty cool. Small card, but really cool flavor because of mostly the art. Then we have taking something back, maybe a piece of glass, a shard, which is interesting because we do have one planeswalker that uses shards. Take it back, 3 mana, returning a spell to its owner's hand. Take it back like don't say that, maybe something like that, reflecting the lightning spell here. Maybe from a giant. A 4 mana fairy warlock then returns, warlock being a witch on Eldraine. The 4 mana creature is a 2/3 with flying, not too useful. But then when it ends the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. So that's pretty okay. Sort of making them forget the spell, basically. So you can counter it, and then later you can, if it was the only card in their hand left, make them discard it as well. The Tempest Heart is sort of a giant, but it is an elemental elk, but it is really big. Also playing with lightning, as we see here, but also just storms in multiple ways. We have Scan the Clouds, which is a 2 mana, draw 2 cards, whoa, and then discard 2 cards. Still good, because you do want to cycle through a lot of things. And then for 4 mana, you get a 3/4 with trample, which is okay. And then whenever you cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater, you put a +1 counter on it, which you don't really want on such a big creature that is so big already, but still a cool upside. Again, we also see the, I think, mana value 5 or greater theme here, which seems to be about big cards, or maybe that is why the giants are attuned to lightning, because they are closer to the clouds, and lightning needs a lot of size to use. Something like that. For 3 mana, we have the adventure Rip the Seams of this person's clothes, I think. But they are the thread-bind clique, sort of trapping a human in these threads together. Which is why I think you destroy target tapped creature who has attacked. Is a flavor, at least. So for 4 mana you get a flying 3/3 as well, which has Giggles of the Light, maybe the last thing you hear. Well, doesn't say too much to me. We do have Twining Twins, please make this better. We have the Swift Spiral, exile target non-token creature. Return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So you can't destroy a token, but you do get to return a creature. So this is probably about the Azorius ETB theme here. For 4 mana you get a 4/4 as well, Flying Vigilance and Ward, which is very strong, but of course this is a rare. Maybe this is a, yes, this is a rhyme. We spin and spin to keep us busy, but somehow you're the one who's dizzy. Yeah, I guess if you are the Twining Twins, you should not become sick very fast from spiraling. And then last but not least, we have a very cool one, the last Celestia one, which says Mend the Wilds, putting a permanent from your graveyard on top of your library. And then for 3 mana you get this man who has become one with the wilds, who we can see came from Ardenville, from the helmet and the rings here, who says that he left knighthood behind to heal the scars of the invasion, which is very cute because we do see a lot of these humans returning to the wilds. And that was it for all of the adventures. Hope you love seeing them just like me, and have a nice day.